Hello and welcome to the Locker Room. I'm Patrick Gaynor. Today I'm joined by Ethan Perry and Adina Brown. How are the both of you?
Going well, thanks Paddy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, really happy to be here. Thanks for inviting us.
Well, on today's show, we'll discuss expansion plans for the NRLW competition and the Origin eligibility rules, which have been called into question around the World Cup. So let's get straight into the show with our first segment. The NRLW will continue its expansion with 4 more teams joining the competition for the 2023 season. It means that 10 sides will compete for the premiership next year, but there are concerns that maybe the talent pool is not deep enough. Ethan, we'll start with you. Are there enough quality players to support 10 teams?
Paddy, straight up, no, I don't think there is. You just mentioned before there's 4 new teams set to join the league next year. There was 3 new teams last year. That means the league's pretty much doubled in the last 3 years. What's a no-brainer for me is to grow the Origin series, like moving from 1 game to 3 games. We've seen great support and viewership numbers for that, but I don't necessarily think that funding the NRLW with all these new teams is going to be that beneficial in that short period of time. There's no doubt the game is growing, but I don't think it's growing at the pace to fit all these new teams in. I heard Millie Boyle earlier in the year, Newcastle prop, she said that the teams are really struggling to fill in those last few spots on the roster each year. So I don't think this rapid growth and this expansion model is going to be that beneficial. To NRLW's credit, what they have done well in the past is they've taken that slow burn approach to ensure that there has been enough elite talent to fill in those teams. But I don't think this rapid growth period now is going to be the way to go.
Well, Adina, how do you think the NRLW should go about improving the talent pool in the competition?
Yeah, well, I think money definitely talks for everyone. I believe that they need to invest more in their players in those development programs, new facilities, more staff to look after the girls when it comes to developing into professional athletes. I also believe that scouting needs to be widened a bit more, going out to those country towns and really seeing that natural talent and then using those facilities to develop those players into professional athletes.
Well, Ethan, what do you hope the future holds for the NRLW?
Well, Paddy, I think we've got to be really careful not to go down the AFLW's footsteps too much. While I'm more for providing these new pathways and avenues to grow the sport, which is obviously important, producing high quality games and competition, that's equally as important. And if you look at the AFLW this year, they had 18 teams or so. You're seeing score lines of 98-1, and that's just not competitive. And if the games aren't going to be competitive, you're going to lose interest, you're going to lose viewers. So yeah, we've got to be careful about that.
Well, we all hope the Women's League expansion is a success next year. But let's move on because the Rugby League World Cup is underway in the UK. One of the issues circling the tournament is the number of Australian players who are turning out for their country of heritage. Back home, some of the players, despite playing for another country, also want to be eligible for State of Origin. So it's a very complicated situation. But Adina, do you believe that players should be able to play in State of Origin and for the Pacific Island nation?
I do. I definitely believe that certain players have those cultural connections and heritage, so being able to represent their family and their background, I think, is a valuable thing for them personally. I do believe that if you were born in the state of New South Wales or Queensland and you went through juniors, you should be able to have the opportunity to play for State of Origin. Given you're not selected for the Australian team, then I think you should be allowed to play for whoever you like, but I also think Australia need to make the selection of their players first. I mean, we're looking at the lineup right now, and they've definitely by far got the best team in the whole of the World Cup. So those players who don't get the opportunity to represent Australia should be able to participate either way.
Well, Ethan, taking in what Adina said, what do you think about players playing for another country if they're not selected for Australia?
Well, Paddy, while I can agree with some of the points Adina makes, I think the NRL need to introduce, stricter origin eligibility. It's just to get rid of all the confusion and unrest that, not only the players have, but also the fans, which is pretty important, around that who can actually play Origin, who can play for Australia. I think, in my opinion, if you're selected to play Origin, you have to make yourself available for the Kangaroos. Because, while I agree, it is good to see, players representing their family's heritage and stuff like that. In the years to come, a real possibility, you're going to see 30 blokes run out and play Origin and, none of them are going to be eligible to play for the Kangaroos. So I think if we go down this black and white ruling, while I understand it may hurt the State of Origin in the international game, it's going to create a lot more clarity.
Well, Adina, to Ethan's point about the grey area, there's been a lot of discussion about someone like Victor Radley who cannot play State of Origin because he's playing for England, but guys like Jerome Lua and Brian Toa playing for Samoa can play State of Origin. I guess, do you think that International Rugby League should just scrap the tier system?
I do. I think in a wider aspect of everything, International Rugby League as a business would make a good decision by doing it. It's then allowing players to be able to play for those heritage. It's evening out the competition, which then brings, those viewers, the fans, and then money, realistically. It's also bringing more recognition to the sport internationally, which then will expand it and make the competition and the talent a lot better. I think right now, the margins we're seeing in the games of World Cup this year is nothing compared to what it could be if those players were allowed to play for who they like, so that then the competition's a lot even. We're seeing more interesting games, things that will make you actually feel wanting to watch it. I mean, 84-0 is not an interesting game to watch. And I just think evening out that talent pool makes it a lot better for, I guess, everyone.
Well, the good thing is that hopefully this eligibility debate is all over by the next World Cup. But let's move on to our final segment. It may be 6 months away, but it's never too early to start predicting. So let's do a way too early 2023 NRL season preview. Ethan, Adina, what team do you think they missed out on finals in 2022 will be there in 2023?
Paddy, as much as I'd love to say that the Dolphins are going to be there in the top 8 next year in their debut season, I don't think they'll be up to the mark straight off the bat. A team that I seriously see being there entrenched in the top 8 next year is the Bulldogs. They've got a ripping young team full of talent. You've got Burton, Kuraz, Shoop, and they've also got some big buys in, Viliami Kikau and Reid Marnie, who were so influential for their team's final runs last year. And a bloke that's going to be there to foster them and put them on the right trajectory, Cameron Ciraldo. He's been the second man in charge over at the Penrith Panthers for the last few seasons. He's done a great job when he's had to take the reins there. I think he's going to be pretty influential for how the Bulldogs go in 2023.
Yeah, I agree with Ethan in that regard, but I'm going to say the Broncos. They've picked up, Reece Walsh, who's a young, great player full of talent. Him being developed in the next few years, I think we'll really see him to turn out to be an all-star player. They've got Corey Oates, they've extended with Furby Harnworth, and they still have Adam Reynolds, who is going to be a great half to take control of that middle and really help develop, players like Reece Walsh. So I think they're great on paper, and let's just hope next season they can show it.
Well, I think the Broncos will be desperate to get into finals after their terrible end to the season this year. But if the Broncos are to go in, which team do you think falls out of finals next year?
I'm going to say the Raiders. They've lost 6 players, which is a big loss to the club. Unfortunately for the Canberra locals that may be watching. I just have to say they're losing Sam Williams, Josh Hodgkinson, Ryan Sutton, Adam Elliott's gone over to Newcastle following his partner. Chance has gone over to Warriors, and then Harry Rushton, who is going back to the UK. So I just think losing that many people the next season can't be promising.
Well, Ricky Stewart will be very disappointed to hear that one. Ethan, is there another team, do you think, that misses out on finals next year?
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with Adina, and the Canberra locals won't like hearing this, but I can't see the Canberra boys, getting back in the 8 next year. Another team that I think might fall out of the 8 and fall off the cliff a little bit is the Parramatta Eels. Obviously, they lost that devastating grand final against Penrith Panthers last year, and I think that's going to leave some pretty big scars. And also, not to mention, they're going to lose some pretty big players. I mentioned Reid Marnie before. They also lose Papali'i to the Tigers and Niukore. Those 3 were influential, huge players for them during their finals runs this year. So mixing that with the devastating loss, I can't see the boys making the 8 next year.
Well, the Eels will certainly be a team to keep an eye on in 2023, but that's all the time we have for here on the program. A big thanks to Ethan and Adina for their insights and analysis. For all the latest news, go to our website, theowluc.com. I'm Patrick Gaynor, and we'll catch you next time in the locker room.